Okay, thank you everybody. Let's start. My name is Rahul Verma. I'm a fellow at the Center for Policy Research, and today we have a very distinguished set of panelists to discuss the 2019 election. And I hope each one of them are going to give their number, and then we are going to hold them accountable after May 23rd. No kidding, we are not going to do that. So we have Dr. Sujit Bhalla. He's an economist. He writes for Indian Express and also appears on Network 18 channels. Recently, he has written a book, The Citizen Raj. Sir, you're carrying the book, right?
Yeah.
That's the book. In that book, he has made forecasts for 2019 election, both for the Congress party and for the BJP by state, right? And so he is going to talk about the numbers he has, why he has arrived at those numbers. Second, we have Dhananjay Joshi. Dhananjay Joshi is managing director of Cicero Associates. He's a big pollster. We both learned from Yogendra Yadav the business of polling. We have taken a different direction as far as our lives are concerned. Dhananjay last time polled for India Today. I don't know whether he wants to talk about who is polling this year and what would be his sample size and what are the trends he's getting. If you don't want to talk about that, fine. We have Sunetra Chaudhary. Sunetra now is the national political editor of Hindustan Times. In 2009, Sunetra and Nagma took a bus tour of 15,000 kilometers, talking to voters across India, and she wrote a book based on that. She'll basically talk about her experience as a traveler during election times, what issues voters talk about, how do political parties respond to those issues. And then we have Phil Oldenburg, an old India hand who has been seeing elections since 1960s. And so he's going to basically talk about how has political culture and how has elections, the conduct of elections have changed over years, and whatever he has to say about many things related to India and Indian politics. Just to sort of like give you a framework of the discussion we are going to have for next 1 hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes. So each panelist would have 8 to 10 minutes to respond to some of the questions I'm going to raise, but also talk about what they think is important regarding 2019 elections, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So if you have been reading and watching television sets, basically primetime TV, you are likely to be confused who's winning the election, right? Everyone, everywhere has a number. And especially on social media, people are announcing that by phase, these many seats one party is getting or not getting. And I think the big question most observers who are on the ground are grappling with, is it a wave election or silent voters are going to decide this election? I have neither understood those two terms for my life, because in political science we don't use these terms, hawa pani lahar, wave, juggernaut, tsunami, all those terms which are in geography is not used in political science because it doesn't mean anything, right? When do you call an election a wave? Was 282 a number for wave? What if it was 302? What is it if it was 242 or 252? So I don't know what wave means. In political science, and this term was like, in 2014, this term was used a lot. So I basically went back to the Bible of people who study elections, the American voter and the new American voter. And in the index, these two terms were not mentioned. Rather, the two terms which were used are normal elections and critical elections. So critical elections are those which are realigning elections. So if you just look at the history of Indian elections from 1952 till 2014, you know some elections were more important than others because they shaped politics for many more years. And it seems like, it's hard to judge a critical election beforehand, but it seems like 2014 was a critical election, which is going to have effect even in other elections. So, and in that sense, 2019 to me seems like a normal election. Why normal election? Because one, there is no wild fluctuation in the turnout, as we saw in 2014. You had 8 to 10% national jump in the turnout. Second, there is no new leadership on the campaign trail. In 2014, there was a new leadership. Third, there is no rage against the government. So yes, people may be dissatisfied, but there's no rage against the government. Similarly, there is no new hope offered by the opposition, right? And finally, everything basically suggests that the base effect of 2014 is going to play out in 2019. So basically what I want our panelists to respond to are 3 or 4 questions. First, in what ways 2019 election is different in terms of like the conduct of election, political culture? Is this a new normal? For me, like I don't remember 1991 election. I do remember 1996 a little bit, but I remember the 1996 Cricket World Cup like ball by ball. How we lost the semi-finals, how we lost the Sri Lanka match in Kanpur. But in some ways, a 1996 election, which was sort of conducted in the backdrop of Ram Mandir mobilization and other things, how do you see 1996 election and 2019 election? Second, is there sort of like a divergence between what issues matter to voters and what political parties are talking about? So yesterday, like on television sets, every time the conversation is basically Congress party should have aligned with party A, party B, party C. It's done and dusted, right? Delhi is voting on Sunday, and the whole debate on TV sets are about this rather than pollution or water crisis, the issues which matters to voter. So is there a divergence? Second, related to this question is basically, so in 90s, and this was a powerful thesis given by Yogendra Yadav and Suhas Palshikar, that the national elections were conducted as if people were electing their chief minister. So you saw a fragmentation. Since 2014, we see a return of national element in the national election. So what is happening at the national level and within the states? Finally, in a conversation, I think Pratap Mehta basically mentioned this phrase. This is a high-stake election, but a very low expectation election in that sense. So in what ways the verdict of 2019 is going to shape the trajectory of Indian democracy, so our democratic values, but also the party system and competitive state at the national and state level. So with these 4 questions, I would like Phil Oldenburg to begin the journey from 1960s till 2020. Thank you.
All right. I assume this is on, right? Or not? Yeah. Okay. Let me start with saying that I'm a scholar who has studied elections and observed quite a few. As Rahul said, I'm now, not today, perhaps today, more or less. It was sometime in April or May, I'm not sure, that I saw my first Indian election, literally 50 years ago, 1969. The Basti Julahan by-election for the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. I'll talk about it in a minute. I started then. I was unfortunately in New York in 1977, so I missed that election. And because at that time there was no serious up-to-the-minute reporting, when asked at a press briefing, well, who's going to win, I got it wrong. As a fair number of people did. And then again in 1980, I got it wrong again, at which point I put a sign on my door, my office door, saying, I hereby vow never again to predict an Indian election. And I have stuck by that vow. So okay, you're forewarned. I have the problem that I'm both involved, obviously, but I'm not a citizen. I can't vote. I can't produce any result in that sense. And I also feel a bit, I'm not about to make it, to have advice. So I'm also not a, who do you favor kind of a thing. You'll get some idea, I suspect, but it's not something that I can throw myself into. So that's by way of warning. I had done a few things, briefing papers on the Indian election. I did that for 1977. I did it again in 1999. I came in 1984 as a government-approved observer and published an article about that experience, which is called Pollsters and Pundits, which I think is appropriate for this particular panel. And I then again, in 1989, I was here for the Bofors election, as it were. But aside from that, I've not. I was here briefly in '96, but that's I don't remember much about that election. because I had actually come for the Bangladesh election that year. Anyhow, so let me, Rahul asked me to sort of give from that perspective what I've seen and what I've learned over these last 50 years, and you can make some judgment. Anyhow, the first was in the 1969 Basiju election. I'm going to read some of this. It was a prestige fight in which I remember vividly a major Congress leader, whose name I've now forgotten, I'm afraid, squatting beside a woman who was cooking in her juggi in Basti Julahan. I don't know whether you know Basti Julahan, sort of behind Sheila Cinema on the Qutb Road. It was a very poor area near the Eidgah. Squatting beside a woman who was cooking, fanning her and asking for her vote. Now, with an audience, obviously. And the voter I met in that same election, a different case, who was sitting there by himself, and he was sitting in his juggi, and he had one Congress flag and one Jansang flag. So I said to him, what does this mean? He said, well, they offered me a flag, so I took it. I put it up. They were happy. The other people came, said, give me a flag. They put it up. I was happy. So I'll talk about the lessons for this. That's one also vivid memory. A third one was a batch, and this you no longer see. There were throughout the gullies. There were little school children in the 7, 8, 9, so on, with a party worker in front, and they would do a call and response kind of thing. So the party worker would say something, and the school children would then, in chorus and having a great time, waving their flags, say things. The slogan that they said, this was from the Jansang, was "Bapuji ne kya kaha tha, Congress ko tod do." So these kids would all go, "Congress ko tod do," and everybody was just jumping up and down. What are the lessons? First of all, I got a vivid lesson that politicians literally beg for votes. Beautifully dressed senior politician is sitting there fanning a woman and saying, "I want your vote." Now, it's for show, perhaps, but it's also, I think, a key to understanding a great deal of what is there. If you read Makulika Banerjee on this subject, people understand that they have a vote to give, and it has to be asked for nicely. Let's see. An additional lesson, let's say, elections are also, let's see, voters, the man with the two flags, I have found in all the times that I've been there and talked to voters, they are not about to tell me who they're going to vote for. Or they may say, guess at who I think they ought to be saying. I don't trust them. And I've heard lots of complaints. Maybe I have one person, a political worker that I got to know very well, who really, he was just saying, I cannot get my wife to vote for the man that he works for, the counselor that he worked for, because her uncle was somehow in the other party. So I learned that also. And finally, on this, that the kids in the street, up until Mr. Session spoiled it all for us, the festivity of elections, even though it was, I think, annoying for the people who had loudspeakers in their ears at 11 o'clock at night, because, of course, nobody ever comes on time to any street meeting or corner meeting. But I miss it. I miss the blood-stirring thing of people, of lots of flags, lots of chanting, lots of this sort of thing. And frankly, the fights on TV don't do the same thing to me. They just disgust me. Anyhow, so those are lessons that I think that I've learned. Politicians are made to beg for votes. Let's see. I learned some other things in that first year of doing research. I looked at the voting that happened in Shah Jahanabad. I did my research in one ward in the old city of Delhi, and I found polling stations, and this was before totalizing, before they were all mixed. So I had records by polling booth, which were 100% Muslim, which had significant numbers of Jansang votes. And that was, for me, an object lesson saying, do not assume that ethnic identity determines vote. It influences, but it's not determinant. Pay attention to the fact, when polling is done, that 60%, 70%, or 80% of a particular caste or a particular community is voting in a certain way. Don't forget that there's another 20 or 30%. And that what may happen is how that slides up and down rather than this absolute thing. All the politicians, everybody, all the commentators, all talk about the so-and-sos vote in such and such a way. Now, my wife is from Lucknow, and there's no such thing as in Lucknow saying the Muslims of Lucknow vote in certain ways, because there are Shia Muslims and there are Sunni Muslims, and they do not vote the same way. So that lesson is also learned. Over the years, the tamasha has been largely suppressed, sifted from the streets to the mohallas late at night, to television and social media. I suspect that senior politicians no longer have many interactions with ordinary voters, but the habit voters have of not telling you who they will vote for is still there, and the habit we analysts have of assigning votes to broad ethnic categories at the expense of other factors like class and gender, less now gender, but certainly class has disappeared, persists. And that's something I think we have to, we cannot simply as analysts adopt the sort of the cliche language that exists in politics by politicians, and particularly by people who are on TV these days. Anyhow, the crucial link between voter and candidate and party has remained, though. This is, I think, very important. This is what was there then in my earliest experience and is true today. The local party worker who gets people registered or makes sure there's on the voters list, puts up posters and takes down the opposition's posters, except now they don't do posters anymore. So I'm not sure how they do what they do late at night. Anyhow, who are the bodies that make up road shows and various kinds of and rally audiences. These are the guys who show up when the rally is scheduled and sit there for 2 hours waiting for somebody to come and do it. These people are the core structure that exists. And I once interviewed one of these people and said, why do you do this? Why do you spend all of this time, all of this effort doing this? And his answer was, he said, I joined this campaign a few years ago, and hum nashe mein aaye. And that, I think, is still true. There's this group of intoxicated party workers who work very hard, and that was true then, and it's true, I think, still today. Two minor points about change, which just these are little niggling things. I have a platform I can say things like this. People are now talking about, I don't know whether others will talk about nota. What is nota? And people have said, but the fact is that those in the old days, voters invented nota for themselves. They did one of two ways. You could either spoil your ballot by going two things and making yourself into an invalid vote, but more likely you voted for one of the millions of independents who were also on the ballot. And that was nota. That was nota. And that nobody, if they're doing analysis and don't compare nota to the sum vote of independence, I think you're a mistake. The second thing is, this goes to your point, we analysts have subtly redefined the wave election from what it used to mean, in my view, a surge of support for one party in the final stages of the election. That's what a wave is. Now, you might be able to talk about a tide, if you'd like, or a current, if you wish. But wave has been misused. Wave has been, and there were wave elections. There have been wave elections, and they are important to keep an eye out for. This one doesn't look to me like being a wave election. I wrote an article after the '84 elections that argued in favor of pollsters over pundits, and I haven't changed my mind. I'd like to think, I mean, Surjit, of course, is a prime example, and Surjit was the best predictor of the totals in 2014, if you go back and look. Anyhow, I've known him for a long time, so you have to take that with a little bit. Anyhow, I'd like to think that scholars do a better job of identifying deeper factors that explain election results, but you can discount my prejudice. I note that Surjit's prediction is there. With all the caveats, and I think Pranoy Roy and Dora Supariwala's book is very good in this respect. I still suspect that the pollsters will again be right, albeit one or two pundits, because of chance, will do as well. But basically, I trust pollsters over pundits. You could read my article to find out, well, I don't know who the pundits are that I'm doing that. Present company accepted. But when the results are in, if you want to understand what happened, look first at the exit polls that correlate voting with other characteristics of the voter and compare that pattern with older ones. I have also benefited from going back to what Yogendra Yadav calls the worm's eye view, from journalists going into the countryside and city mohallas to see whether there is evidence from those accounts for the explanations pundits with the field to themselves will claim they knew all along, or perhaps even wrote. I want to end with one explanation or one thing that I've been, this is a sort of a zombie meme that I've been trying to kill since that article which was published in 1988. But I think it's an object lesson, that this is a meme, this is a thing that people have grabbed a hold of in order to label an election. The 84 election has been labeled a sympathy wave election. When I went over my field notes, when I came for 2 weeks and went around and did things, I then spent literally a month or so, reading all the newspaper reports from the constituencies, the major newspapers, looking for the sympathy wave, because I never understood it. I don't understand why a voter would vote for Rajiv Gandhi somehow because he's lost his mother. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't remember anyone saying it to me at the time. And sure enough, when I went back and looked at these reports, and I'm sure you all, like me, skim them as you see them in the newspaper. I've gone to such and such constituency, and I talked to this one, and I had tea, and I did this, and so forth and so forth. I looked at them looking for the sympathy wave, among other things. Not there. So there is something that we have to be, I think it's something that we analysts have to be very careful about. The effort to say, we've got, here's the thing that is going to decide the election, or even the things, 3 or 4. We have to be very, very skeptical of it. And I urge you not to accept the idea that 84 was a sympathy wave election. Thank you.
Straight up.
Did I do it?
Should I add certain questions?
No,
Okay.
that's fine. I actually agree with you being dismissive of us journalists and the stories that we write, because it's true. We never know exactly what's happening, and we just kind of go along with it. And it's all about, I think, more than predicting, for all of us reporters, it's about just bringing a flavor of the election to help you understand. And what elections do for us is that, it gives us a huge insight, it gives us huge access. So a lot of the people who otherwise won't let us in, we get a ringside view. And it also gives us a huge reason to travel. Rahul was mentioning the 2009 election that I did. It was amazing because basically I was given a bus, and we also had a satellite in that bus. And so we were told 2 months in advance, just travel across the country. So there was an amazing journey which we did a decade ago, which involved us just going by bus all the way up to Rajasthan, then all the way up to Tamil Nadu, coming back up, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh and ending, and also going up to Himachal and Uttarakhand. So we literally travel all along. And the one thing that I learned out of that election, out of that travel after, because I think that I was the journalist who had traveled to maximum number of constituencies, spoken to the maximum number of people, and at the end of it, I still didn't know who was going to win. It was a big surprise for me, whoever won as well. So it's completely right. But here's what we do have. We do get, I think election reporting also brings us a lot of perspective about how the country is changing. And I think for that, it's really precious as well. I'll give you an example. In 2017, everyone talked about the fact that why Modi really won Uttar Pradesh was the fact that, he had managed to get a lot of the people who were non-traditional BJP voters onto his side. So he got a lot of the Dalit votes and the other, the non-Jata votes and things like that as well. Well, so, we didn't have the big theory, but what we did have was that I went to this Dalit area near Meerut, and we met this young woman who was living in a house that when Mayawati was chief minister, her parents had got that house. So she was a direct beneficiary of Mayawati's schemes. And yet, she said, and she lived in a Dalit basti. And, she was educated, she was young, she was doing well. And she said to me, I don't know, my parents have voted Mayawati, this is going to be my first vote, but I don't know, I like Modi as well. So she didn't say I'm going to vote for Modi. She didn't say anything like that, but she did give us a perspective about how, and I think that became the trend everywhere, that, this is what BJP boasts about now. That, look, we've got women voters on our side, because they say, of course, that it's because we've done initiatives like triple talaq, or we've got the Ujjwala scheme, and that's why women are voting for us. It's only when you go and start listening to a lot of the people and you just travel around, you see things like that. For example, I'll give you that, we went to this place in Baripada in Odisha. And over there, we went to this village and they didn't have any electricity. But we realized that, there were a whole lot of farmers there, and it was really hot, obviously. It was this time of the year, so it was really, really hot. And they'd all stopped working and they were watching TV because an IPL match was on. And a lot of the kids were using, even though they didn't have electricity, they had tractor batteries to charge their phones. So it told us a lot about what's important to their life. They needed things like that. They needed telecom, they needed access to mobile phones, they needed an English education, because the little boy was, they were like little kids over there, and they told us that, we want to learn English like you. So, so if in Shivgarh, when we met people like that, in Uttar Pradesh, it was obvious that they were going to vote for people who was going to provide them that kind of quality education and that kind of thing. So it's true that we don't get to know exactly who is winning on it, but you get to know what's important to people's lives. Now, what's also, of course, when you talked about divergence, one of the questions, Rahul, that you asked was, what do people talk about in TV studios, or what do people in Delhi think, and how is it really different? I think as soon as you step out and you go across the country and you do election reporting, and I think that becomes really obvious as well, then you realize that a lot of the things that people are talking about doesn't impact things at all. For example, during like right now, one of the things that dominates newspapers or television channels is who said what, and the kind of ridiculous statements that are made by various leaders. Now, I remember during Gujarat election, the Congress really thought that Manishankar Iyer making that comment about Narendra Modi did actually dip the Congress's fortunes. The Congress actually thought that. Now, while it would have taken away, because I can understand the fact that, it would have, instead of working towards getting their voters to booths or focusing on, energizing their party workers, they spent a lot of energy kind of deflecting the negative press they were getting. So yes, it impacts the election that way. But really, a lot of the things that we hear in the newspapers and the headlines and all, people don't care about that. They care about things that really impact their lives. And all of these things about, Giriraj Singh telling people to go to Pakistan. A lot of people will tell you that, that actually changed things for the party, and, people got upset. But in the long run, I don't think all of that matters a lot. I think that makes they make for great stories. But on the ground, I don't think it really matters a lot. So yes, there's really actually a huge divergence of what people are saying here in Delhi and what's over there. I mean, I think in 2009, one could see when you went out there that the loan waiver scheme, the fact that they had got the loan waiver and the entire thing, that was the big ticket thing that the UP had passed. And people were talking about that. So obviously, I think at that time, there was a big factor there as well. But some things you just don't know what happened. And I think I haven't got the Gujarat elections. This election, I haven't traveled around that much. Although right now I'm just coming from a rally in Bathinda because I went to interview someone. Like in 2017, you could see the fact that the whole demonetization anger was really, 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 you could feel it. It was, you could feel that, and in Gujarat it impacted it all. And that's why perhaps the Congress made such gains over there. However, what we couldn't explain, and I don't think any of the Congress people or the BJP has been, we've spoken to so many people, and I've constantly asked them this because I was there, was that if GST was such a huge factor there, and there was tremendous, because of the trading community and the business community, there was a huge factor. Why is it that Surat, which is the hub of the diamond traders and all that, why is it that they all voted for the BJP? Now they say, the BJP people explained it to me by saying that's because at the last minute we took an entire team. Mr. Jaitley went there himself and he took a team of the GST people involved with it. They sat down with traders and said, okay, what is your problem, what is your problem? And they really did that kind of targeted approach. But I'm not sure it's just that. And it really doesn't explain why, if it was GST or if it was all of these issues which helped the Congress come so close and, force the BJP for the first time in a long time to get less than 100 seats. I mean, Congress really came close over there. It doesn't explain how in the hub of that area, which is Surat, Congress was wiped out. It was like complete zero. I mean, Hardik Patel, he was like holding his head and saying, I don't know why this is. I mean, he campaigned heavily over there. And it just didn't work out. So some things just don't make sense anymore. And I think that's what the magic about elections really is. That you're always wondering, in retrospect, you think that it's, you have it all figured out. And a lot of reporters will say, well, I knew. In my story, I said that as well. But really, you don't know. What's interesting is also that, everyone keeps changing their mind. So right now, you go and meet every politician. And I always think that politicians, they have, when they're not speaking on camera, when they're just talking to you, they have a good sense of what's happening. So sometimes they admit things to you as well. Some of them, if you know the right kind of politicians. And what's interesting is, for example, they said that the reason why Congress did really well in Madhya Pradesh in the assembly elections, and what's amazing is that the thing has been completely turned on its head in the 2019 elections. In 2018, one of the trends that apparently emerged from the results was the fact that Congress also started doing well in the urban seats. Well, if you speak to the Congress people right now, they'll tell you it's not true anymore. In this urban seats, they're all talking about Narendra Modi, and his appeal is working very well for the BJP. But in the rural areas, Congress is expecting to do well. So I'm not sure how it works really, I know that everyone says that things really change in assembly elections. In assembly elections, they're thinking about the local reasons, but in the whole presidential style that it's becoming, it's meant to be like that. But it's interesting, and I think all of these ideas are so fascinating, which make, for us, it's a great story, even if we keep getting it wrong.
Can I ask you one small question?
Yeah.
Because most of us don't have that kind of access, right? Like with politicians, you guys go and interview them. Because I talked about cricket, when there's a match going on, we of course try to look at how, like, the shoulders of a player down, we're going to lose the match, right? So if you meet politicians, can you, by looking at the politician, talking to them, get a sense of, oh, my seat is gone, or that is basically a makeup and it doesn't matter?
A lot of journalists say that you do, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so at all. But I'll tell you this, that the day the results came out in Gujarat, I was reporting from the BJP headquarters. And it took a long time for them to come out and claim it as a victory, because it really wasn't for them. They didn't feel that. But they had to, this was a huge setback. This is the seat. This is the Gujarat model. This is the seat of the entire Modi Shah thing. And I can tell you, just as they then had to send out the thing saying that we've done amazingly well, this is a huge victory, we're really celebrating. And there weren't any celebrations till at least 6 o'clock, so they had to force their workers to come out and celebrate. Of course, things have completely changed around now. Right now, BJP and Congress, they're saying that, Congress is saying that their best case scenario right now is 6 out of the seats there. That's a Congress's own prediction. The BJP, of course, says that they'll get 24 at least out of the 26 seats. So, so things have completely changed in the last 1.5 years. But I'm saying that, they're very good at projecting something in front of reporters. But I think what gives it away are the other people and the kind of, the optics around it.
Okay.
So.
Dhananjay, what's the final number?
Well,
That's all we care about.
well, that's I know, and that's what people
But
like me.
Dhananjay, I would want you to sort of while talking about what you're doing in the polls, also when we look for exit polls this time, what are 3 or 4 elements as a viewer we should look into them to sort of distinguish between a good poll or a bad poll, if you can sort of touch upon.
Well, 2 things. Dr. Oldenburg was talking about Prannoy Roy, Durab Supariwala, and Pollsters and Pundits. And the only one lesson I got from Dr. Prannoy Roy is that never tell anybody that you predicted it right. So he said that, never go and claim that you knew it. And the point is what to look for in a good poll or a bad poll. The first thing is, what is the poll claiming? I see a lot of polls coming in which are going to give one number based on a survey. A survey has an error. How can you come out with one particular number? There has to be a range within the error. The second is, are they disclosing their methods? Is there a proper disclosure? Around the world, there are WAPOR, SOMAR, APOR guidelines. That's the World Association of Public Opinion Researchers, American Association of Public Opinion Researchers, which have compliances of the way you treat your subjects, that's the respondents. How do you give a disclosure about your methods? Here, unfortunately, barring few organizations, we seldom see any disclosure on methods. You would not know whether it was a focus group discussion aggregated into a seat forecast, to whether it was a telephonic model, whether it was a face-to-face model, whether it was mock voting, secret ballot. No, none of these things are generally disclosed. So, responding to that question, I think a good poll, and I know television has very less time, especially in prime time. There's hardly any time to give these disclosures, but I still think that it doesn't take much to give a disclosure. And I have seen channels. In fact, I've worked with a team at CSDS last time, as Rahul told you. We were working with India Today, and we ensured that even if it was just a few seconds, we gave a table on sample profile. And I'm not talking about sample size, because a bad sample and a big sample can give you some very different results from a good sample and a small sample. So these are the basic things that one should look at while trying to assess an exit poll. Besides that, this time we've been seeing polls going in all directions, and these days, as Rahul's been saying, that with social media, people have been coming out and giving predictions without any proper model or any proper disclosure. So that's a challenge that people like us who actually invest into polling or invest into forecast, whether it's a survey-based forecast or there's another model, or journalists who actually cover elections extensively. Well, the fact is that we could get it wrong, because the fact is that pollsters do get surveys, their forecasts wrong. And in fact, I think that whether it's a market forecast, whether it is an astrologer making a forecast, or whether it is a pollster making a forecast, prediction by definition can go wrong. So, on the other hand, somebody who just didn't do anything, might be sitting in a drawing room watching television, could get the right forecast. So that's a risk that we stand. So, besides that, I'll just come to some of the questions that came out from the discussion till now. And the first one that I want to really come to is that, and which I found very, very interesting, is whether politicians actually know what is going to happen. And I I work with a lot of politicians, do surveys for them, give them the data, and generally give them the bad news. And generally what I hear is, well, your survey is going wrong. Yeah, well, you are wrong on this. Why? Because we are winning. And how do you know that we are winning? Well, ask my workers. Now, we've had a culture in India where workers have to impress their leader and say, "Ki Sahab, you are winning. You are so good that you are winning. And we have worked very hard on the ground and you are winning." So that happens all the time. So I don't think, seldom do people actually know what's going to happen. Though I think that politicians, by and large, get a sense of the real situation with time. But to, I think, accept it to themselves is a difficult process because they are so heavily invested in the election. So if, let's say, 4 or 5 days before the election, if a politician actually comes out and accepts this, that, well, I might lose, the whole election machinery might fall down. So that is something that I really see as a big problem in India. And last time, I remember working for the AAP in 2013, and everybody questioned the survey. So that time my ex-boss and my guru, Yogendra Yadav, was in the AAP. So he asked me what can be done. So we decided that we'll make the data public. We'll put it in the public domain. Let data scientists come and check it. So people saw the data, and somebody from the Congress came and told me that, "Are you actually nuts? You're saying that we might win less than 5 seats. We have XYZ, X budget of elections and campaign budgets, and Sheila Dikshit has done so well." So I was anxious about this because getting that wrong meant that, that was the first big survey that I was doing after leaving CSDS, and well, if I had got that wrong, it was the end of my story. So I was very anxious, and then I started doing some qualitative work. And the one thing that I realized is, and that again connects to what Sunitra was talking about, a beneficiary from Mayawati's policies voting for the BJP. And that is that the question of what next. You were a good chief minister. We used to have these XYZ problems in Delhi. You solved them well, good enough. 15 years you were there. Now what are you offering me? What's next? So this what's next factor is something that I see when I travel through Uttar Pradesh, especially amongst Dalit voters. Again, there's this kind of a factor that, okay, you know, Kashiram, and you gave us a voice, gave my grandfather a job, got us XYZ. Today we are very, very much better off than what we were 30 years ago. But what next? You've got your solitaires, you've got your convoys. What did we get? The young Dalit voter, somewhere I see, is asking this question, which is not to say that Dalit votes are entirely going away from BSP. I'm certainly not trying to suggest that. But the question of what next is something that again and again is something that I have seen over the past few years. I remember in Haryana, for instance, in a by-election in 2012, Bhupender Singh Hooda, the chief minister then, was campaigning, saying that it is under my rule that ordinary people have got SUVs in their houses and your lands have become worth of crores. And I heard people saying that, well, again, okay, now we have achieved this. Now what are we getting after this? Kind of a thing. So the voter ultimately, I think, is looking for something new in every election. And in this election, very frankly, the promises of last time, and I'm certainly not making a political point over here because that's not my job, but there's still a big gray area on what has been delivered. And that is why to many, one, there might be an element of hope that, and I have heard this, that okay, it's just 5 years, we need to give this government another 5 years. On the other hand, there would be people who might be having dissatisfaction, but then there is also, and the way the BJP is campaigning, focusing on the Prime Minister and trying to make it more of a presidential election, then there is a question that what do we get on the other hand? Now, whatever scattered evidence we have from surveys suggests that policies such as, let's say, Nyay could have done well, but it's too little too late. Well, you brought that in, the Congress brought that in too late, and its alliance arithmetic did not work. And alliance arithmetic did not work is not only about alliances, alliances also somewhere in Indian elections are a reconfiguration of social alliances. So not only political alliances. If the Congress and let's say the JJP, that's a breakup group of Chautalas in Haryana, would have had an alliance, it would have also meant consolidation of Jat votes to a certain extent. Similarly, in Uttar Pradesh, if they had some kind of seat adjustment with the Mahagathbandhan, it would have made a difference in the kind of vote splitting that I assume would happen amongst, let's say, minorities or some other communities as well. So, elections largely, I think, boil down to local or state level alliance arithmetic. It's true that unlike the 90s, now there is an element of national election, but that element is still far from being a presidential style of election, because if you look at this election, then what about the 4 southern states? Soon people tend to argue that this is, and again, I would not use the term wave, but when some people say, well, it's a Modi wave. So if it were a wave, then what about the southern states? Or there's widespread discontent against the BJP. Then what about states where the BJP would maybe, 4 times its tally? Maybe in eastern India. So what about that? So there are state level factors. And this election, although there's not a lot of excitement because nothing very new is expected, as Rahul said in the beginning, there isn't great anger against the government. There aren't new leaders in the race. So it might appear to be a bit mundane, but at the same time, well, I think this election will have its own impact in the way politics in this country is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. The overall narrative, what are going to be the issues that are going to play a role in actual voting in this election, will also affect the way the next few years politics is going to be conducted, how the opposition will have to, whoever is in opposition, will have to work things out, and how parties will have to take their positions or realign their positions. So that's the broad
Let
thing.
me ask you a quick question. Try another way to get that number.
Okay.
So, pre-polls, there was a convergence among pre-polls on basically giving somewhere 250 plus to NDA.
Which pre-polls? Which time of pre-polls?
So I think most pre-polls were conducted in mid-March,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right after Pulwama,
Right.
Balakot strike. So there, of course, so the minimum number most of these pre-polls were giving was sort of 250, 260 for NDA, and some were predicting around 300. So the other way of basically asking the same question is, do you think the fundamentals of elections have changed over this last 6 or 7 weeks? There were certain fundamentals that made up that number.
Right.
Has they
right.
changed, or have they stayed largely the same?
Well, how I see it is that November, December, and right from Gujarat election onwards, what Gujarat really did was that it broke the myth that the BJP under its present leadership is invincible, because there was a very, very strong fight that the Congress gave, and I again think it was more of social engineering than anything else. But that apart, that's not really what we are here to debate for now. So what happened is, after that, December elections come, the Congress does well, though actually it did not, in my opinion, it didn't do so well, because after 15 years of anti-incumbency, or of having a BJP government, they could not get more popular votes than the BJP. In Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh was fairly well, but then again Rajasthan, these are wafer thin majorities. So I wouldn't really call it a very, very good performance for the Congress, but certainly what happened is that the narrative changed, that okay, they can be an opposition, they can be a non-BJP government, and then people started talking about 180 for BJP, 200 for BJP, and then Pulwama happens, and then Balakot happens, and it's like a stock shooting up. So there's one news in the stock market, and the share starts going up. So that's the way I saw BJP going up. Now, like every bull run, then there's a correction. So the correction is coming, and over the weeks, I think there has been a correction. Now, where does the correction stop? Is something that people like Dr. Bhalla will be able to tell us better. So,
Okay. Dr. Bhalla.
Yeah. Couple of, and I'll try and answer the several questions that have come up. I'll start with, you started off with the 2014 election, whether that was a wave election, a tsunami election, or whatever it was. One very important point about the 2014 election, waves, tsunamis, etc., were all exposed. Ex ante, the election was wide open. And that is what, people's memory, whether it's of pollsters or everybody else, everybody is right exposed. So then, oh yeah, of course it was a wave election, this, that. But for people who make not a living, but whose hobby is to forecast, that's sort of taking away the entire work that you do in trying to come up with a forecast. So basically, and there are several in this audience who, so I think that is one thing that we should be very, very careful about. That was a wave election, and this is a non-wave election or whatever. Second bit, and slowly I'll weave in how the forecast that you sort of let the cat out of the bag before, but not your fault. That the margins in 2014 were very, very large. Take, for example, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan and Gujarat. 20%. 20% was the difference. Now, mind you, the reason I've taken these three, this doesn't have the Mahagathbandhan and the people uniting. It's the same two-party system. And in a two-party system, you have a huge, huge gap between the Congress and the BJP in 3 or 4 important states. And you add Maharashtra, which has 48 seats, and you have the coalition. Nothing has changed there. There's no Mahagathbandhan business there. It's the same old story. And in Bihar is a different story, again going the other way, because now Nitish is with the BJP. So I think if you take the big states, that it is an insurmountable mountain for the Congress. So which gets me to the point about why this hawa, that there is actually a close election, and there are many. I think, and this I try and go in the book, if the Congress, and all of this started, as you rightly said, with the Gujarat election and then the Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh election, that the Congress did much better than they expected. And suddenly, it went back to, oh, this is an even battle. From 44, we can at least get to 144, which is 140, 145 is what the Congress got in many, many elections. We forget, basically around that mean. It went down to 114 in 1999, and it went up to 206 in 2009. So, I think that the what we need to assess in order to forecast an election are what are the issues and why was it such a wave election exposed. 44 seats for the Congress to get in a major election, not even 10%, which the Constitution or somewhere in there, the rules mandate for you to be a major opposition party. So I think something happened in 2014. It's imperative for us to try and understand before we make a prediction for 2019. I want to not diverge, but to disagree a little bit with Dhananjay on, this, and this is a problem I have with the entire political correctness of opinion polling, forecasting, give your standard errors, etc., which I think is, first of all, you are reflecting a broad, I've been on TV shows with you and others where what's your standard error, what's your sample size, etc. This shows the Indian psyche of not believing in the market. People, why do I can come up with any number. And people will then discount me as a forecaster. They're not going to go, they remember whether you got it right or you got it wrong, which is correct, and by how much you got it right and how much you got it wrong. So I don't believe in any disclosure, whatever. Okay? The TV guys, when they hire you, they do their homework. They say, okay, is this person credible? Is this person not credible? And then we all make errors. We all make errors. So, but there's a larger point over here, and that is with the model code of conduct that we have for elections. I find this the most objectionable thing going around. Elections are a lot of fun for everybody. Let loose. Again, same story. If I, as a candidate, make a lot of noises that are completely untrue, etc., I think somewhere out of 10, 1 will win and 9 will lose. And, we just don't give. And I'll come to now I've just spent 4 or 5 days in UP and West Bengal. We don't give enough credit to the people who are making the opinions and who are casting their vote. And, you started off with that and I think you mentioned it, and very correctly, it's their most prized possession. And they're not going to waste it on somebody going to Pakistan or not going to Pakistan, etc. The media finds it, as you think, as, a great story, etc. I don't even know whether it gets them TRPs, but maybe it does. You probably know that. I just find the entire way the elections, the code of conduct, everybody disciplining, you can't say A, you can't say B, etc. Let people say what they want. In any case, they do that. So then we have this vague rule in India, before election, you can't speak on this, and what you have is, on that same election day, because it's a 1 month, all these rules get violated completely. Why do we have them? I don't understand. Now to come to a little bit on what are the things, what is the big picture that is going on. And I think it started off somewhere maybe in 2000 or so, where, there's been an absolute most fundamental change in India over the last 10, 15 years, and it's now at a crescendo or perhaps even peaking. And I'll give you one statistic on that, and that is education. In 2019-20, when the college enrollment takes place, just now in the next 2 months, there will be more women entering college than men. Last year, after a 1,000-year history of Oxford University, was the first time that there were more women entering Oxford than men. for those of us who worked on the economics of this, and we are a country that has consistently been biased against women. We kill girls before they are born and everything else. We know our traditions, but education, if you don't appreciate, in my view, the education revolution that is happening, then I think you're going to miss the entire picture of this election, of India in general, and, if you will, examine some of the other countries. Now let me, the second thing, which is very much related to the education side, is in a very short period of time, and that's maybe 15 years or 20 years max, that we have seen a radical change in the elite structure of the economy, of society. And, I was just mentioning earlier that I feel, I left India at the age of 16 and went to the US. I now feel today, at that time, everybody wanted to learn English and get a foreign education, etc. So did I. Today, everybody still wants to learn English, okay? And even the UP government had that even in nursery school you'll be taught English. But the big difference, and this I think is indicative of the changing of the elites, is that it is also very important for you to know Hindi, or at least your own language in reading and writing. And this is, I think, representative, symbolic of the changing elites. And this is very important for the media to understand. The media in Delhi, I guess all of them are based over here. The finance is based in Bombay, but the media elite is based here. I think just don't get it. And that is why they've consistently made one mistake after another. You mentioned on 2017 in UP how the media made and the Hawa made a huge mistake. But I think what is so in terms of assessing the big picture, this has nothing to do with who you're going to vote for. What do you think? It has got to do with a big macro picture, and I think that is underlying a lot of the stuff that happened in 2014 and is continuing to happen now. Let me give you a few examples. So, as I said, I was in 5 days in UP, 2 days in West Bengal. Was Nyaya ever mentioned? Never. Strangely, okay, in UP and in West Bengal, and UP, of course, there's been a big decline. Are you going to vote for the Congress? The Congress, nobody ever, the way we go around as limousine liberals, you go and ask people, you go to villages, etc. Nobody ever mentioned Congress.
I have just a slide.
Yeah.
A senior BJP leader who's a strategist, he told me that as soon as Nyaya came in, their own internal surveys, they reduced their numbers by 10 seats. Mm-hmm. So obviously Nyaya was a factor. He said that but after this whole Balakot thing, it has fixed itself, and they say because the Congress is being defensive and keep mentioning it, and Manmohan Singh's entire thing, it's kind of undone that. But Nyaya by itself, 10 seats was his own assessment.
In the book I detail in terms of how I gathered, and let's take Nyaya, then there's Balakot, did that have an effect, etc. All I can do is to go by what Aankhon Dekha Hal, and don't go by what the politicians say. I give them much less credibility on either side. It doesn't matter which politician it is. So all I'm saying is I didn't get Nyaya mentioned amongst when you ask people what they're going to vote for. I didn't mention. Nobody ever said they were going to vote for the Congress. Congress is non-existent in UP and in West Bengal. The other element, what is a big theme amongst the media in Delhi, okay, which you see on everything. There's a real fear amongst the people about the economy, about not about the economy, but about the ruling regime. People are very afraid to give their views. So this place in UP, there is on one side of the road, in the middle of the sort of rural areas, first of all, a lot of economic development has taken place in India and in UP. The amount of motorcycles you see there are beyond comprehension. And it must be the case that they've got the motorcycles, everybody's got the motorcycle on loan because there are no jobs to be found, and everybody's Vela, etc. One curious thing about everybody being Vela, you do not see young men during the daytime. You don't see too many young women during the daytime. Okay, so they're going to school now. Of course, now they're not in school, etc. But what is amazing in the last week, I didn't see people hanging around. I've been doing this for traveling across India since 1998, which makes it exactly 21 years. So the elite, their version of reality, alternate reality, is what is, I think, quite out of sync with what is happening. One other thing, so no fear, the Muslims saying who they're going to vote for, why they're going to vote for, the Hindus saying who they're going to vote for, etc. Caste, I think I found, much to my, not surprised, but I didn't like, but, UP sort of caste is a big predictable factor this election. Whether it'll play out on an all India basis, I don't know. The Congress has been going on, or the opposition, on whether it's Nyay or the economy or the jobs. So one thing that is really working for the opposition, and in a very good sense working for the opposition, and this is how democracy is rich and vibrant, is cow politics. Okay, that whether you meet a Hindu, whether you meet a Muslim, whether you meet somebody who's neither, everybody thinks this is about the stupidest policy. And what happened after Modi came in, not Modi, sorry, after Yogi came in 2017. Now, for all of those interested, so I think cow politics is hurting the BJP. Definitely hurting the BJP. And, whether it is cow politics as in we've got to save the cow, or as an anti-Muslim measure, you can take your pick. It's probably more the latter than the former, but even the former. And you get Hindus, Muslims, etc. saying this is just not correct and they're losing out. I'll give you two statistics which on cow politics. If you look at the 72,000 that the BJP, 72,000 crores that the BJP has given to the farmers to alleviate in a minor way their poverty, it comes out, there are about 8 million cows or 10 million cows, I forget the actual numbers are there, that are above the age of 8, above the age of giving milk, when they're absolutely useless. Okay? And the upkeep of a cow, and which is why this is the economy, they go out, you have to feed them, etc., is approximately 40 to 50 rupees. You take that number, you take the 50 rupees a day, you multiply the two, you get exactly 72,000 crores. Maybe one of the most massive coincidences, but that is a reality. And I think, the other part about cow politics is that I think, okay, and this is, and I mentioned this in the book, etc., that whether this is there was Prime Minister Modi who came out and made great noises on how these guys are thugs and everything else. 2 weeks later, Bhagwat comes out and says these are children of God, they're really decent people, etc. So you have within the BJP RSS thing a huge conflict as to how to interpret the cow politics. So I don't know how much of this is coming out from the battle, and I think this is so. I'll end with the following. I think there are two battles that will become clear and that will define what happens over the next 5 years. The first is, I think this election is much more about the Congress than it is about the BJP. So I think all of us will be, there's a prediction, and I'll come to predictions in a minute. All of us will be discussing what now for the Congress, okay? So that's one battle that will be turnout. The second one, apart from the economic battles, will be the RSS-BJP equation. Now, if you want to define RSS as defined by Mohan Bhagwat, fine. But this is going to be the number one. And I don't know how many of you know, etc., that, you know, Savarkar, who's the dean, whatever, the founder, did not believe in the holy cow at all. So, you know, this whole, and one last thing on the cow, we have to worry, we as Indians have to worry, I think, about our constitution. The license for cow politics was given by the Constitution of India, which then there are two major Supreme Court decisions, apart from the license that we got from our Hindu constitution. It may be good, it may be bad, but I think it's correct to define it as a Hindu constitution, where they have in the directive principles, thou shalt not kill the cow, okay? And thou shalt endeavor to make the society such that you don't kill the cow. In 1959, and both of these incidents happened under the Congress, but most incidents happened under the Congress because in 70 years the Congress was available. So don't read too much into it, but read something into it. 1959, Supreme Court ruled that basically, you know, you can, that below 14 years of age, you can't kill a cow. Okay, that's when, in 1959. 2005, they completely brought in this illegality of killing a cow at any age. Okay, so the ruination of the economy. Now, what people did, now it's a state subject, it's a constitution, we are a federal polity, so states can do something, but the entire, you know, we need to, as a society, come up, I mean, 2019, to have this notion that, and which is ruining people's lives, is something that we need to consider. One last thing, didn't hear the temple anywhere in UP. Did not hear. Nobody ever mentions it. So there's a lot of progress in India. There's a lot of progress, right? The politicians may do that, but nobody just, even in a casual conversation. So I had the, you know, what was the conversation? What you and I have and should have about the economy, about the policies, maybe even foreign policy, Balakot, India's position in the world stage. These are the things people are talking about. Nobody's talking, and about the cow ruining the economy. So, you know, I think this is a fantastic moment for India. You know, there is change, there's palpable change, there is very good change, and people are now, you know, girls and boys are looking for something very different than what the politicians seem to be talking about.
So what's the headline numbers in the book?
Okay, the headline numbers, look.
After we get the headline numbers, I think the sales of your book would go up.
No, look, as I go, as I'm at pains to point out in the book itself, that don't pay attention to the forecast. You know, only 2 out of 14 chapters on the forecast. The rest is the political, economic, sociological, electoral history of India from 1947. But I think if my numbers turn out to be right, the book will sell. If my numbers turn out to be wrong, everybody will forget the book. Okay. So, the numbers are, and I give reasons for the forecast. I give 4 different scenarios based all explained, mind you.
Yeah.
Full disclosure how I got the number. Okay, and the numbers are given as to how I got the number. It's from margins and various and swings and so on and so forth, the usual stuff. That I think I would be very surprised if the BJP on its own got less than 230 seats. My expectation is today somewhere it's changed a little bit after my trip to UP, especially on the cows. So I have my forecast as 274. I would think that they have lost an additional 15 to 20 seats because of cows. And so, maybe somewhere around 255 is my forecast for the BJP. And for the Congress, I think I'll be very, very surprised if they get anything above 70. I would not be surprised if they got a few seats less than last time, or maybe a few seats more. But 57 is the number in there. On forecast, again.
One more forecast. Because you travel to West Bengal, and in my opinion, this election is being contested only in 2 states, UP and West Bengal.
I would, marginal difference with you, the 2 states are West Bengal and Orissa.
Okay.
West Bengal and Orissa. So 1/23rd, when the returns start coming in, see what's happening in West Bengal. And UP, mind you, is
open.
The Mahagathbandhan, there is the caste math working. While I'm forecasting, this is to differ from my very good friend Prannoy, I go, my allegiance and my first most important influence on politics and forecasting was Ray Fair, who was my professor you would know, who came out with a mathematical model for the US elections back in 1971. And while I was there, so he said, as a forecaster, remember 2 rules. Forecast often and always remind people when you're right. So that's what I hope to do on 23rd.
Okay.